The sun was just beginning to cast long shadows through the trees as Tom Jones walked quietly through the forest. The early morning air felt crisp against his face, and he could see his breath forming small clouds with each exhale. Tom had been hunting in these woods for over 20 years, but today he decided to try a new area, deeper in the Appalachian forest than he usually ventured. The woods were peaceful that morning. Birds sang their morning songs, and occasionally a squirrel would dart across his path, disappearing into the underbrush. Tom moved carefully, his boots making almost no sound on the carpet of fallen leaves. He had spotted fresh deer tracks about a half-mile back and was following them with the patience that only comes from years of experience. As he rounded a large oak tree, something caught his ear, a sound that didn't belong in these quiet woods. At first, he thought he had imagined it, but then he patted again. A faint whimpering sound, almost like a child crying, but not quite human. "Hello!" Tom called out softly, but only silence answered him. He stood completely still, listening intently. After a few moments, the sound came again, definitely an animal in distress. Tom forgot about the deer tracks and began moving toward the noise, a feeling of concern growing in his chest. The whimpering led him to a small clearing surrounded by thick pine trees. That's when he saw it, a dog tied to a tree. Not just tied, but abandoned. The sight made Tom's heart sink. The poor animal was a German Shepherd, but it looked nothing like the strong, healthy dogs he was used to seeing. This dog was thin, so thin that Tom could count every rib from where he stood. Its once beautiful coat was matted and dirty. The rope around its neck had rubbed the fur away, leaving raw skin underneath. But what really got to Tom were the dog's eyes. Those eyes told the story of suffering, yet somehow still held a spark of hope. When the dog saw Tom, its tail gave the weakest of wags, as if it was using its last bit of strength to say hello. "Hey there, buddy," Tom said softly, setting his rifle carefully against a nearby tree. He approached slowly, not wanting to scare the already frightened animal. "How long have you been out here all alone?" The dog watched him cautiously but didn't bark or growl. Tom guessed it was too weak even for that. As he got closer, he could see that the situation was even worse than he first thought. The rope was frayed and dirty, tied so tightly that it was a wonder the dog could breathe at all. A nearly empty bowl lay on its side nearby. Someone had left water at some point, but it had long since dried up. Tom knelt down, still keeping a safe distance. He reached for his canteen and poured some water into his cupped hand. "Are you thirsty, boy?" "I bet you are." He held out his hand. The dog looked at the water, then back at Tom's face, as if trying to decide if this human could be trusted. Slowly, painfully, the dog stretched its neck as far as the rope would allow and began to lap at the water in Tom's palm. "That's it," Tom encouraged, his voice thick with emotion. "Drink up." As the dog drank, Tom noticed how its whole body trembled with the effort. Who could do this to an animal? Who could tie up a dog in the middle of nowhere and just leave it to die? The thought made anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it aside. Right now, this dog needed help, not his anger. "Don't you worry," Tom whispered, gently stroking the dog's head with his free hand. "I'm going to get you out of here. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." After giving the dog more water, Tom began to look around the clearing. Something didn't feel right. Why would someone leave their dog out here, miles from any trail or road? "How long have you been here, boy?" Tom whispered, gently examining the rope. What he saw made his stomach turn. The rope had dug so deeply into the dog's neck that the skin had started to grow around it in places. This wasn't a case of someone forgetting their pet for a day or two. This dog had been here for weeks. Tom worked carefully to loosen the rope, talking softly to the animal the whole time. "Easy now. I know it hurts, but I've got to get this off you." The dog whimpered but stayed still, as if understanding that Tom was trying to help. As Tom worked on freeing the dog, he noticed something partially hidden under a pile of leaves about 10 feet away. The corner of something blue was just barely visible. Tom gave the dog a reassuring pat and walked over to investigate. Brushing away the leaves, he found a backpack. It was once bright blue, but now it was faded and weather-beaten, clearly having been exposed to the elements for some time. Tom glanced back at the dog, who watched him with tired eyes. "Is this your owner's?" he asked, not expecting an answer. The dog's ears perked up slightly. Tom opened the backpack carefully. Inside, he found a few basic supplies: a flashlight with dead batteries, an empty water bottle, some energy bar wrappers, and at the bottom, a small leather-bound journal. The journal was slightly damp but still readable. Tom flipped it open to the first page. Property of John Wilson was written in neat handwriting, along with a phone number with a local area code. Tom felt a chill. He knew that name. There had been something in the local paper a few weeks back about a missing hiker. Could this be the same person? He began to flip through the pages. The journal entry started about 2 months ago, describing John's hikes through different parts of the forest. The writing was detailed and thoughtful, with observations about wildlife and plant life. John seemed to be an experienced outdoorsman and a careful observer. But as Tom continued reading, the entries took a strange turn. About 3 weeks before the final entry, John had started writing about unusual things he was noticing in a particular area of the forest. Found another barrel today, one entry read. That makes 5 in total, all half buried near the creek. The labels are mostly worn off, but I could make out a logo that looks like the one from Valley Chemical. That's odd since their facility is over 20 miles from here. Why would their barrels be in this remote location? Tom's interest deepened. Valley Chemical was the biggest employer in the county. They made agricultural chemicals and had been a part of the community for decades. His own brother-in-law, Pete, had worked there for 15 years. The entries continued, each one more concerning than the last. Water in the creek looks off today. There's an oily film on top and a smell that burns my nose. Took samples in my water bottle. We'll drop them off at the University Environmental Lab tomorrow. Lab called. They wouldn't tell me details over the phone, but said I should bring the samples to the EPA office in person. Meeting scheduled for next Monday. The final entry was dated 3 weeks ago. Someone's been following me on my last 2 hikes. Yesterday, I found boot prints that weren't mine circling back to my car. Called the sheriff, but they didn't seem concerned. Today, I heard strange noises near my camping spot. Going to check out that old hunting cabin I found last week. If someone's watching me, I need a place to hide what I found. If anything happens to me, I pray someone finds Scout and this journal. The truth needs to come out. Tom looked up from the journal, his heart pounding. He looked at the dog, Scout, who was watching him intently. Your owner was in trouble, wasn't he, boy? Tom said softly. And I think he tied you here to keep you safe, hoping someone would find you. Scout whined softly, as if confirming Tom's suspicion. The sun was starting to sink lower in the sky. Tom checked his watch. It was already past 4 p.m. He'd need to make a decision quickly. He could head back to his truck with Scout and deal with this journal later, or he could try to find the cabin John had mentioned. Looking at Scout's weakened state, Tom knew the dog needed food and proper medical care soon. But something in his gut told him that finding that cabin might be important, not just for solving the mystery of what happened to John, but maybe for Scout's sake too. What do you think, Scout? You up for showing me where your owner might have gone? Tom asked, gently stroking the dog's head. At the sound of his name, Scout's ears perked up slightly. Tom took the last bit of beef jerky from his pocket and offered it to the dog, who took it gently from his hand. All right then. Let's find this cabin before it gets dark. Tom gathered his rifle and the backpack with John's journal. He tried to pick up Scout, but the dog whined and struggled weakly. Okay, you can walk. But we'll go slow. To Tom's surprise, once freed from the tree, Scout seemed to gain a bit of energy. The dog sniffed the air, then began walking with purpose toward the denser part of the forest. Every few steps, he'd look back as if making sure Tom was following. You know where we're going, don't you? Tom said with amazement. He followed Scout, keeping a close eye on the weakened animal. The going was slow. Scout would walk for a few minutes, then need to rest. Tom used these breaks to check their surroundings and make sure they weren't getting too lost. The forest grew thicker and darker as they moved away from the clearing. The pine trees here were so dense that little sunlight filtered through. After nearly an hour of this stop-and-go hiking, Scout led them to a small ridge. Below, nestled among a stand of old pine trees, stood a small cabin. It was the kind old-timers used for hunting, just a one-room structure with a tin roof and a small porch. But unlike the well-maintained hunting cabins Tom was familiar with, this one looked like it hadn't been used in years. One of the windows was broken, and the porch steps had rotted away. "Is this it, boy?" Tom asked. Scout wagged his tail weakly and whined, pulling toward the cabin. Tom approached cautiously, his hunter's instincts on high alert. The door to the cabin hung partially open, creaking slightly in the breeze. Drawing his hunting knife, just in case, Tom pushed the door open further and peered inside. The scene made him take a step back. The cabin's interior was a mess, not just the usual mess of an abandoned building, but the kind that told of violence. A small table was overturned, its lay broken. A lantern lay shattered on the floor. And most disturbing of all, dark stains that looked horribly like dried blood marked the rough wooden floorboards. "Hello," Tom called out, not really expecting an answer. Silence was his only reply. Scout pushed past Tom's legs and entered the cabin, heading straight for a corner where a worn backpack lay. Beside it was a sleeping bag, unrolled but empty. Scout sniffed at the sleeping bag, then looked up at Tom with sad eyes. Stepping carefully around the overturned furniture, Tom examined the cabin more closely. Tacked to one wall were several photographs. Tom moved closer to look at them. They showed a man in his 30s with a woman and a little girl about 6 years old. They were smiling, arms around each other, standing in front of a lake. In another photo, the same man was kneeling beside Scout. A much healthier Scout, both of them looking happy on a hiking trail. "That's John, isn't it?" Tom said softly. Scout whined in response, pawing at the floorboards beneath the photos. Tom noticed something else then, a smartphone charger plugged into a portable battery pack, but no phone in sight. A pair of hiking boots neatly placed by the sleeping bag. A half-empty water bottle. Someone had been living here recently, and they'd left in a hurry or been forced to leave. Scout continued to paw at the floorboards, whining more urgently now. "What is it, boy? What are you trying to show me?" Tom knelt down beside the dog. Looking more closely, he noticed one floorboard seemed slightly raised compared to the others. He pressed on it, and it moved slightly. Tom's fingers searched the edges of the loose floorboard. He found a small gap and managed to work his fingertips into it. With a grunt, he pulled upward. The board came free, revealing a dark space beneath. "What have we got here, Scout?" Tom murmured, reaching into the hole. His fingers touched something smooth and cool, plastic. He pulled out a waterproof container about the size of a sandwich box. It was sealed tight with duct tape around the edges. Next to where the container had been, Tom spotted a folded piece of paper inside a Ziploc bag. He took out both items and sat back on his heels, Scout watching his every move. The dog's eyes never left the container, as if he knew exactly what was inside. Tom opened the Ziploc bag first and unfolded the paper. It was a handwritten letter, the writing hurried but clear. "To whoever finds Scout. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. My name is John Wilson. The dog you found is Scout, my best friend and hiking companion for the last 5 years. I'm an environmental engineer. 3 months ago, while hiking with Scout, I discovered something disturbing, evidence of toxic waste dumping in these woods by Valley Chemical. The creek that runs through this area feeds into the town's water supply. I've documented everything, soil samples, water tests, photographs of trucks dumping waste at night. When I confronted management with what I'd found, they offered me money to keep quiet. When I refused, the threats started. First phone calls, then my car was vandalized. Last week, someone broke into my house. I've copied all my evidence onto the USB drive in this container. I've also sent copies to my lawyer, but I'm worried they might get to him too. Valley Chemical practically owns this town. I tied Scout to a tree far from here and left him enough food and water for 2 days. I hoped someone would find him and eventually this message. Scout is smart. He knows where this cabin is. I couldn't risk keeping him with me in case whoever is following me means to do harm. If I don't make it back to Scout, please take care of him. And please, get this evidence to the EPA office in the city or to a newspaper outside of town. The people at Valley Chemical can't be allowed to keep poisoning our water. Thank you. John Wilson. Tom read the letter twice, his hands shaking slightly by the end. He looked at Scout, who was lying with his head on his paws, watching Tom with those soulful eyes. "Your owner was a brave man, Scout," Tom said softly, reaching out to stroke the dog's head. "I'm sorry I was too late to help him." Tom then turned his attention to the plastic container. He carefully peeled off the duct tape and opened it. Inside was a USB drive, some folded papers that looked like lab reports, and a small notebook with dates and locations written in it. Everything was dry and well preserved. Taking out the USB drive, Tom turned it over in his hand. Such a small thing, but according to John's letter, it contained evidence that could bring down one of the biggest companies in the county. Evidence that might have cost John his life. Tom's mind raced. Valley Chemical provided jobs for hundreds of people in their small town. His brother-in-law, Pete, had worked there since high school. If what John had discovered was true, and if Tom took this evidence public, what would happen to all those people? To his own family? But then again, if Valley Chemical was really dumping toxic waste that was getting into the water supply, how many people were getting sick because of it? How many kids? Scout whined softly and nudged Tom's hand with his nose, as if sensing his internal struggle. "What would you do, boy?" Tom asked, knowing he wouldn't get an answer. Your owner knew what was right. He was willing to risk everything. Outside, the light was fading fast. Soon it would be completely dark, and they were miles from any road or trail. Tom had a small flashlight, but finding his way back in the dark would be challenging, especially with a weakened dog in tow. Tom carefully put everything back in the container and sealed it. He placed it in John's backpack along with the journal he'd found earlier. "We need to get you some help first," Tom said to Scout, who was looking weaker by the minute. "Then we'll figure out what to do about all this." Tom looked at Scout, who had laid down on the cabin floor, his breathing shallow. The dog needed help, and soon. Whatever Tom decided to do about John's evidence would have to wait. Right now, saving Scout was the priority. "Come on, boy. We need to get going," Tom said gently, reaching down to stroke Scout's head. The dog tried to stand but stumbled, his legs too weak to support him. "That's okay. I've got you," Tom said, taking off his hunting jacket and spreading it on the floor. With careful movements, he helped Scout onto the jacket. Then, using the jacket as a makeshift stretcher, he lifted the dog into his arms. Scout was lighter than he should have been, another sign of how long he'd been tied to that tree without proper food. Tom adjusted his grip, making sure the dog was secure and as comfortable as possible. "Let's get you to Doc Brown," Tom said, referring to the local vet who had helped with Tom's hunting dogs for years. "He'll know what to do." Carrying Scout and the backpack with the evidence, Tom made his way out of the cabin. Outside, the forest had grown dark. Tom pulled out his small flashlight and clicked it on, holding it in his mouth since his hands were full with Scout. The trek back would be difficult in the dark, but Tom knew these woods better than most. He set off, choosing his path carefully to avoid roots and holes that might trip him up. Every few minutes, Tom would pause to check on Scout. The dog's breathing seemed to be getting more labored, and his eyes looked glassy. Tom tried not to worry, but he couldn't help it. He had only known this dog for a few hours, but already he felt responsible for him. "Hang in there, buddy," Tom whispered. "Just a few more miles." As he walked, Tom's mind turned to the evidence in the backpack. Valley Chemical had been the lifeblood of their town for decades. His father had worked there before retiring. His childhood friend Bill was a shift supervisor there now. And Pete, his sister's husband, was counting on his job there to support their new baby. But if what John had discovered was true, if the company was dumping toxic chemicals that were getting into the water supply, how many people were being hurt? Tom thought about the news stories over the past few years. There seemed to be more and more cases of unusual illnesses in town, especially among the kids. People blamed it on everything from bad luck to too much screen time. What if the real cause was in their water? Tom's thoughts were interrupted by Scout's whimper. The dog was shivering now, despite the mild evening temperature. "Just a little further," Tom said, picking up his pace despite his tired arms. By the time Tom reached his truck at the edge of the forest, his arms were burning from the strain of carrying Scout. Carefully, he placed the dog on the passenger seat and covered him with an old blanket he kept in the back. "We're going to get you help now," Tom said, starting the engine. He glanced at his watch, 8:30 p.m. Doc Brown's clinic would be closed, but Tom knew where the vet lived, It wasn't far. As Tom drove down the winding road toward town, Scout's condition seemed to worsen. The dog's breathing became more irregular, and he wasn't responding when Tom called his name. "Don't you give up on me," Tom said, reaching over to touch Scout's side. "John didn't go through all this just for you to quit now. And I didn't carry you for miles just to lose you." Tom pressed harder on the gas pedal, taking the curves faster than was probably safe. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty country road. In the distance, the lights of town began to appear. Tom reached for his cell phone and dialed Doc Brown's number. It rang several times before a gruff voice answered. "Doc, it's Tom Jones. I'm sorry to call so late, but I've got an emergency. I found a dog in the woods. He's in really bad shape. Looks like he's been tied up and abandoned for weeks. I'm bringing him to your place right now." "Bring him around back," Doc replied without hesitation. "I'll meet you there." Tom looked over at Scout, who had gone very still. "Did you hear that, boy? Help is waiting for us. Just hold on a little longer." 3 days had passed since Tom found Scout in the woods. The dog was still at Doc Brown's clinic, getting stronger each day, but not yet well enough to come home. Tom had visited every morning and evening, bringing chicken broth and sitting with Scout while he ate. With each visit, the bond between them grew stronger. Tom hadn't told anyone about John's evidence yet. The USB drive and journal sat hidden in a lockbox in his garage while he tried to figure out what to do. On the 4th morning, Tom walked into the clinic to find Scout standing up in his kennel, wagging his tail. "Well, look at you," Tom said, smiling for what felt like the first time in days. "You're looking better, buddy." Doc Brown came in, chart in hand. "He's a fighter, that's for sure. His blood work is improving, and the infection around his neck is clearing up. I think he can go home tomorrow, as long as someone's there to take care of him." "I'll take him," Tom said without hesitation. "He can stay with me." Later that day, Tom sat at his kitchen table, staring at John's USB drive. He couldn't put this off any longer. Plugging it into his laptop, he began to look through the files. What he found made his blood run cold. There were photos of Valley Chemical trucks dumping barrels in the woods at night. Water and soil test results showing dangerous levels of chemicals. Internal emails from company executives discussing how to hide the dumping from inspectors. And most stunning of all, a map showing how the contamination was spreading toward the town's water supply. Tom picked up his phone and called Mary Chen, a reporter he knew at the county newspaper. Mary had done stories on local hunting competitions before, and Tom had always found her to be fair and thorough. "Mary, it's Tom Jones. I need to talk to you about something important. Can we meet?" An hour later, they sat in a quiet corner of the library. Tom had brought copies of some of the most important documents, but not the original USB drive. "This is incredible," Mary said, looking through the papers. "And you say you found all this in the woods?" Tom told her the whole story, finding Scout, discovering John's journal, and the hidden evidence, everything except the exact location of the cabin. "Valley Chemical has a lot of power in this town," Mary said when he finished. "If we publish this, there's going to be backlash, not just from the company, but from people worried about their jobs." "I know," Tom said. "My own brother-in-law works there, but people need to know what's happening. Kids are getting sick." Mary gathered the papers carefully. "I'm going to need to verify all this before we can publish anything. And I'll need to talk to my editor. We might need help from a bigger paper, someone the company can't pressure as easily." "Just be careful," Tom warned. "I think John Wilson was killed because of what he found." 2 weeks later, the story broke, not just in the local paper, but in a major city newspaper as well. Valley Chemical accused of illegal toxic dumping read the headline. The story included some of John's evidence, interviews with environmental experts, and comments from families of sick children in the town. The reaction was immediate and intense. Valley Chemical issued a statement denying everything and promising legal action against the newspapers. Local opinion was divided. Many people feared for their jobs, while others were outraged about the potential health risks. Tom found himself caught in the middle. Some people guessed he was the anonymous source mentioned in the article. His phone rang constantly with calls from neighbors, some supportive, others angry. Pete, his brother-in-law, stopped speaking to him entirely. The worst came 3 days after the story broke. Tom arrived home to find his front window broken and spray paint across his garage door. Job killer. That night, as Tom swept up the broken glass, his doorbell rang. He answered cautiously, ready for more confrontation. Instead, he found Chief Walker from the police department standing there. "Evening, Tom. Got a minute?" Tom nodded, letting him in. "We found human remains in the woods yesterday," the chief said without preamble. "About a mile from where you said you found that dog. Dental records confirm it's John Wilson." Tom sat down heavily. "So he was murdered." "Looks that way. And now the state police and FBI are involved. They're serving search warrants at Valley Chemical tomorrow morning." Before the chief left, he paused at the door. "You did the right thing, Tom. Not everyone's going to thank you for it, at least not right away. But you did right." Later that evening, Tom sat on his back porch with Scout beside him. The dog was recovering well, gaining weight and strength every day. Tom scratched behind Scout's ears, watching the sunset. "Your owner was a brave man, Scout," Tom said softly. "I hope I did right by him. By both of you." Scout leaned against Tom's leg, looking up at him with trusting eyes. In that moment, Tom knew that whatever trouble came his way because of this, he could face it. The truth had needed to come out. 6 months passed. The leaves that had been green when Tom found Scout were now changing color again, painting the hills around town in reds and golds. So much had changed in those months. Tom sat on his front porch swing, coffee mug in hand. Scout lay beside him, no longer the skinny, frightened dog from the forest. His coat was thick and healthy now, his eyes bright and alert. He had become Tom's constant companion, following him everywhere, on walks, in the truck, even to the hardware store where the owner had started keeping dog treats behind the counter. The initial anger many townsfolk had felt toward Tom had slowly faded as the truth about Valley Chemical came to light. The FBI investigation had uncovered even more than John had documented: decades of illegal dumping, falsified safety reports, and bribes to local officials to look the other way. 3 executives now faced criminal charges, and cleanup of the contaminated areas had begun. Valley Chemical had shut down, putting over 200 people out of work. That had been the hardest part. Tom's brother-in-law Pete had struggled to find another job, and things remained tense between them. But last week, Pete had stopped by unexpectedly. Billy's tests came back clean, Pete had said, speaking of his 7-year-old son who had been suffering from mysterious stomach issues for years. "Doctor says whatever was making him sick is out of his system now." They hadn't quite made peace yet, but it was a start. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway pulled Tom from his thoughts. Scout's ears perked up and he stood tail-wagging hesitantly. A woman and a young girl stepped out of the car. Tom recognized them from the photos in the cabin, John's wife and daughter. He had spoken to Linda Wilson on the phone a few times since John's body had been identified, but this was the first time they had met in person. Scout's reaction was immediate. He bounded down the porch steps, whining with excitement, his whole body wiggling as he reached the little girl. She dropped to her knees, throwing her arms around his neck. "Scout, Scout," she cried, burying her face in his fur. "You remember me?" Linda walked toward the porch, smiling through tears as she watched her daughter reunite with their dog. "Thank you for inviting us, Tom. Abby has been counting down the days." Tom nodded, his own throat tight with emotion. "Would you like to come in? I've got lemonade made." Inside, over glasses of lemonade, Linda showed Tom a newspaper clipping. "Did you see this? They're renaming the new water treatment plant after John. The John Wilson Memorial Water Treatment Facility." Tom hadn't seen it. He'd been avoiding the papers lately, tired of seeing his own name mentioned. "The Memorial Fund has raised enough to cover Abby's college someday," Linda continued. "And the settlement from Valley Chemical will help the families whose kids got sick." She paused, looking out the window where Abby was throwing a ball for Scout in the yard. "John would be happy to see Scout with you. He loved that dog so much." "Scout saved a lot of people," Tom said. "John did too." Later, as the afternoon sun began to lower, they all walked to the edge of Tom's property where a small creek ran through the trees. The water was clear now. The cleanup crews had started here first. Abby threw sticks into the water for Scout to fetch, laughing as he splashed around. Watching them, Tom felt something loosen in his chest. The past months had been hard, filled with accusations, legal meetings, and lost friendships. But seeing Scout so happy, hearing Abby's laughter, knowing that Billy and other children were getting better, it had all been worth it. Linda stood beside Tom, watching her daughter play with the dog. John used to say that Scout could find his way home from anywhere. I guess he was right. Tom nodded, not trusting himself to speak. His vision blurred as tears filled his eyes. Scout had found his way home, and in a way, he had led Tom home too, to a truth that needed to be told, and a purpose he hadn't known he was looking for. As the setting sun painted the creek in golden light, Tom let the tears come. They weren't tears of sadness, but of healing, for himself, for Scout, for this small town that would rebuild itself better than before.